The Church at 1002 is a weekly preaching series designed to help you translate the unchanging gospel in an ever-changing world. These messages will help you navigate the challenges of life with the truth of Scripture so that you can live out the way of Jesus in the places you live, work, and play, and allow the world to experience the hope of the gospel through your life. If you find these messages helpful, then subscribe to our channel, like the message, and share it with someone else that needs to experience the unchanging gospel for their ever-changing world. Welcome to the Church at 1002.
Church at 1002, it is Easter Sunday, and this is my first Easter Sunday ever just preaching into a camera. But you know what's so funny about that is I was just as nervous prepping this message or trying to figure out what to say as I have been if I knew a crowd of people were going to be coming into a room. In fact, sometimes Easter, it always kind of feels like it has this extra weight. The message, is so important, and so many people connect on Easter Sunday. You just want to do it right, you know? And sometimes that worry about wanting to do it right causes you to overthink the Easter Sunday message. And sometimes it's important to just step back and remember just how simple it is. Now, I'm telling you that because for the last 3 weeks, I've been overthinking Easter Sunday. You know, we've been watching recap messages for the last 3 weeks, and I've been thinking, what am I going to talk about on Easter? What are we going to do? And I just remembered that first Easter I ever preached. I wasn't even a pastor. I was a pastor intern at a little congregation in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I'd already preached Christmas Eve, so I thought, no way I'm preaching Easter Sunday. And then the senior pastor came in the room and he said, hey, you want to preach Easter? I was like, you mean like the Super Bowl of all preaching events? Yeah, who wouldn't want to preach Easter? But what intern ever thinks they're going to be the ones that get up and preach Easter? And I was so excited, and then all of a sudden it hit the weight of Easter Sunday. The reality that there would be people in the room who maybe come to church a couple times a year, people who maybe even got dragged in, and the opportunity just to share who Jesus is and what it could mean for their life. All of a sudden, I was overthinking the message. I was trying to make it funny and deep and pulling in quotes. I think I even had a quote from Mother Teresa in there. And one of my rhythms when I was preaching was I would simply share the message with my fiance before. She would give me some feedback so that when I went in Sunday, it could be better than it ever would have been before. And I was sharing this message with her, a message that was already on its third draft. And I just remember her looking at me going, that's just not it. This is the Saturday before Easter Sunday. And I remember just thinking, oh no, this is not good. So I hung up with her and I was praying, and then I called my buddy Joe, and my buddy Joe just looked at me and he said, dude, just tell a simple story and share the gospel. Don't overcomplicate it, because the gospel is simple, but it's powerful. And so as I think about that moment, I just want to share with you actually the story that I shared then, and just a few short verses from the Gospel of Mark that really highlight just what the resurrection means, not just for the church at large, but for you today. And so the story that I thought of when I think of Easter, in fact, I think of this story a lot when I think of grace, is 16 years old, and I had been driving for about 6 months, and I thought I was God's gift to driving. I had a perfect driving record because I'd been driving for 6 months. And I remember I had this car. It was this lime green neon. Imagine the brightest, ugliest color you could possibly imagine, right? The inside of the car was amazing, but I was literally probably the only person in Kansas City who drove a lime green neon. And I think my parents liked that. because if you saw the lime green neon, you knew Matt Peoples was behind the wheel. And I was driving this car and I was going to pick up a friend to take her to our court warming dance. And so I was running a little bit early, and I didn't want to like spend too much time sitting down in the living room having the awkward like conversation with the parents. And so I decided to kind of take the longer way. And as I'm driving up, I come to the light and I start pulling out in the intersection, and I see the green and I start making this left-hand turn, not realizing that if there was somebody else at the intersection, I really needed to be yielding on that left-hand turn. And as I'm pulling out at the blazing speeds of like 5 miles an hour, my bumper taps the bumper on the car in front of me. And at the blazing speeds of 5 miles an hour, my Dodge Neon explodes both airbags out of the front in an effort to save my life. So here I am, middle of the intersection, both airbags are exploded out of the car. Across from me is a car with a mom and her freshman-aged daughter sitting there, and she is bawling like she's just been in a 6-car pileup. I'm sitting here going, this is not good. All of a sudden I hear the sirens and the police are coming and they're moving us off the side of the road, and I think it can't get any worse. And then I watched as my dad pulled up, because one of our friends had driven by the intersection and they'd seen the lime green neon, and they knew the only person who drove a lime green neon in all of Kansas City was going to be sitting on the side of the road after getting in an accident. And as I saw my dad coming up, I just felt this sense of fear over me. I'm like, this is it. I have done it. I've done the worst thing you could possibly do. There is no coming back from this. Almost looking at the police officer going, take me to prison now, because I think he might kill me. And as my dad was walking up, I remember all of a sudden everything changed. And all of a sudden the police officer who was looking at me at some dumb kid is talking to my dad, and he's actually laughing. And my dad changed the entire tone of the room. And he was looking at me, just happy to see I was okay. When we get in the cars, he takes the car with the blown out airbags and drives that back to the house, and I'm driving the van. And then he looks at me and he gives me the keys to a different car so I could still take my date to court warming. And I'll never forget that story, because where I thought my dad was coming in to bring judgment and punishment, he was really just coming in to bring me love and security and a sense of knowing that everything would be okay. And I love that story because I think that's the heart of Easter. You know, so many people, when they think of God, they think of that judgmental picture of God, that God that is coming in to rain down his wrath on them, that God that is looking at the very worst moments of their life and holding it against them. A God that you have to show your best resume, because if you don't show your best resume, there's no room for a relationship with God. And for so many, that's our picture of God. And yet there's this story embedded in the Easter story that radically changes that notion. In fact, it blows that notion out of the water. It's a story in the Gospel of Mark, but to understand the story, the verse I'm going to share with you, you have to understand the background of the story. See, it's Maundy, Thursday. Peter is sitting there with Jesus and the other disciples, and they're all eating what we now call the Last Supper, which is Jesus' last meal. He's celebrating the Passover, but he knows this is the last time he's going to eat this Passover with his disciples. And so he's trying to prepare them for what's about to happen, which they're still not quite getting. And he starts talking about how he's going to go to the cross. And then Peter makes this bold declaration that if everybody else, every one of these other chumps, like Peter kind of says, abandons Jesus, he won't abandon him. He would go with him to death. Well, he's got a chance to kind of prove that point as Jesus looks at him and says, no, you're going to deny me. Later that night, what happens? Later that night, Peter comes up Jesus is arrested. Everybody runs. Peter is trying to get close enough to see Jesus. He actually gets invited into the temple courts of the high priest. And then the servant girl looks at him and she says, "Hey, aren't you one of Jesus' disciples?" And Peter just kind of looks at her and goes, No, I'm not one of the disciples. 2 more times, as he sits by a fire, Jesus, an eye shot away, being accused of things he's never done. The high priest trying to make their case so they can put Jesus to death. And he denies ever knowing him, ever spending 3 years with him, ever sitting next to him. He denies ever knowing him, the one that he literally watched get transfigured on the side of a mountain in all his glory. And he looks and says, "I did not know you." And in that moment, it says the rooster crows. And in Mark chapter 14, verse 72, it says, "And immediately the rooster crowed a second time, and Peter remembered how Jesus had said to him, 'Before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times.' And he broke down and he wept." He broke down and he wept because he knew he didn't live up to the standard he had set for himself. He didn't live up to this bold declaration of the incredible disciple that he was going to be, the perfect person that would literally walk with God to death. But you know what's so interesting about that story? It wasn't Jesus' expectation that Peter would live like that. It was Peter's expectation. And it wasn't Peter who knew he would fail. It was Jesus who knew Peter would fail. But for the next 3 days, Peter lived in the shame of abandoning his master in his greatest moment of need. And then 3 days later, as the women are going to the tomb, it says they walk to the tomb, not knowing how they're going to roll away the stone, and the stone is already rolled away. And they're wondering what's going on. And they go in and they see this man in dazzling white clothes. It's an angel, and he's looking, and he looks straight at these women. They're not expecting to see this. They're expecting to see the body of Jesus there, and they're expecting to finish preparing it and honoring it. But here he is, it's gone. And the man looks at him, the angel, and he says, this in Mark chapter 16, starting at verse 4, "And looking up, they saw the stone had been rolled away. It was very large, and they entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, dressed in a white robe, and they were alarmed, and he said to them, 'Do not be alarmed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He is risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him.'" And then listen to this. This is so powerful. Verse 7, "But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee, and there you will see him just as he told you." Tell his disciples and Peter. And I think that's such a powerful verse, because here's Peter. For the last 3 days, he thinks God's done with him. And yet here in this moment, Jesus takes special attention to send a messenger who says, not simply tell my disciples that I've risen, but make sure Peter knows too. Make sure Peter knows that I'm not angry, that I'm not resentful, that I'm not bitter with him. Make sure Peter knows that I still love him. In the resurrection, that's my opportunity to forgive him. See, Jesus wasn't something to be feared in that moment. Jesus just wanted to draw in to Peter in that moment so that Peter would know he's still loved and he's forgiven and he is still one of Jesus' disciples. See, that's the message of Easter. The message of Easter is a God who desires to draw into us. A God who doesn't want us to think that he's keeping some kind of scorecard and that he's looking at these worst moments in our life and using them as ammunition to throw down his judgment. No, what God is saying through Easter is that death has been conquered. See, grace begins with a grave. And Jesus was willing to walk into that grave so that you could experience the grace he has to give, so that God could look at you just like he looked at Peter and said, "And you." and there's room for you, and I want to meet you, and I want to connect with you, and I want to give you that new life. See, that's the powerful thing about the resurrection. The resurrection means the things in the past are dead, and the new reality we can hold on to is the grace that God has to give. You don't need to fear the presence of God. Easter is a moment where you get to celebrate the presence of God and realize that God loved you so much. As John tells us in John 3:16, right? God loves you so much, he sent his only son to the world to die for you. But don't miss verse 17. For he did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world might have life through him. Resurrection is the reality that Jesus, he wants to connect with you. He wants to give you his life. And he wants to give you the opportunity to live into a new future that he's given. That's the beauty of the resurrection. If death couldn't hold Jesus back from loving you, from forgiving you, then what else could? And so, as you think about and meditate on this day, this Easter Sunday morning, or whenever you're watching this message, I want to just throw a couple questions at you, and they're just really simple questions. What is this story, the story of Jesus and Peter and the resurrection, what does that tell you about God? Start there. What does that tell you about God? And then, what stuck out to you in this story? Like, how did this story hit you, and where did you feel this story speaking into your life? Like, what did you need to hear in this message? And then finally, who will you share this with? Man, this is an incredible story, but it's not just a story for us. It's a story for the people around us. And there's somebody else who thinks that God is angry with them, who thinks that God has some kind of tally and they don't know where they sit with it. But who could you share this story with? And how could it begin to make an impact on them? Hey, I want to thank you for taking an opportunity to spend Easter with us here at Church at 10:02. If this message was a blessing to you, then I want to encourage you, hit like and subscribe to the message, and then take an opportunity to share this out with somebody else, because you never know how a message that's impacted you could make an impact on somebody else. And then if you'd like to be a part of supporting this ministry, Church at 10:02 is a ministry of the Kairos Network. You can simply jump on 10, that's TEN02.church. That's TEN02.church, and you can be a part of supporting this ministry right there. So it's been a joy to spend Easter morning with you, and I just want to leave you with a blessing. The Lord bless you and keep you. Lord, make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you with his favor and bring you his peace. Amen.